Welcome to the Community Warehouse, everybody. This is Imran Nanlawala, and today my co-host Habeeb Quadri will not be available. And we still have a very amazing guest today with us on the Community Warehouse. This is episode 4, and today we have the global head of people at the world famous LaunchGood, Tanal Basma. We're going to be talking about some amazing things related to investing in your capital, your human capital, employees, talking about some of the challenges that HR leaders like Tanal face, and some overall advice and strategy in terms of any organization or corporation that exists. Tanal is going to share with us some of her insight. So without further ado, I'd like to bring Tanal onto the screen. Tanal, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Really thrilled to be here.
So whatever I say today, is this going to be held against me? Can we strike whatever I say from the record?
No, feel free to. I take feedback well. So hit me.
No, no problem. So obviously, we've been interviewing. So today, usually we would have had my co-host with us, Habeeb Quadri, who is a national award-winning educator, does work for Harvard directly, and so many other things, and he has a lot of insight from his perspective. So I'm gonna try to fill two roles today. Um, but obviously, we wanted to talk to you because of your role at LaunchGood. LaunchGood, kind of burst on the scene really out of nowhere and has grown really fast. But often what happens is we forget the role of HR in a growth of an organization. And because you guys are behind the scenes, right? And you guys are dealing with all the things that happen within the organization behind closed doors. But then to some extent, you guys are also forward facing. So, general question: what is HR and what is the role of HR in any organization?
Ooh, that's a loaded question, but I'll try to get to it as best as I can.
Sure.
So, in my experience, and to give you a little bit of context, for the past year when COVID hit, there was things in flux, and what we saw was that the role of HR started evolving.
Mm.
What was traditionally a compliant, mostly focused on governance role became this front-facing, very pivotal role, helping people thrive in their organizations. And so, from my point of view, I think there's never been a better time to be in that hot seat because it's really about empowering people to do their best work. It's about getting your team members to execute on your strategy and helping them understand that you're in it for the long run.
Mm. So give us some concrete examples then. So in terms of traditionally, you said it had to do with governance. So what do you mean by that? Is it like policies and procedures for the organization?
Yeah, so based on when I was doing my research last year, we brought in a group of HR folks from around the world, and we were trying to crack the code on what HR is and how we
Mm.
can help empower our people within our organizations. And the recurring sentiment that we kept hearing was that HR is just the police officer, or HR is like the that back end headmistress that's there to like put you in line when you misbehave.
Mm.
That was a recurring sentiment from the other functions, but that's not how HR themselves see themselves. So it was this delicate balance between governance and culture. And it was really helping the HR themselves rethink about how they could advocate for their team members while also keeping things in compliant and reducing the element of risk that they're there to kind of oversee. And risk in terms of like, putting in the processes, helping people understand what the rules are, but not making it so focused on the rules as
Mm.
opposed to how people feel or how people see themselves within the scheme of the organization.
I'm so happy you answered it the way you did, because one of the points I had was that from my experience, HR is an advocate for a couple different sides, right? Two different sides. One is the employer, and then one is the human component of it, which are the employees. So can you talk to us about that balance? And I would say that my master's was in higher education leadership, and one of the first things that we learned was that as a higher educational leader, you're really now advocating and working with a few different sides. You're helping the students, but you're also keeping the universities like missions and objectives in mind. And then you also have to take into account the instructors and professors. So can you talk to us about, in any organization, within the organization, who are the primary stakeholders, and which is another loaded question. And then how do you account for these stakeholders? How do you make sure that both sides are winning?
So I've had a very interesting career, and when I look back, I realized that really the your business strategy is your people strategy.
Mm.
So we've gone through waves like throughout history, like when we're like, oh, we need to focus on the shareholder. Oh no, we need to focus on the customer, and it's gone through different waves. And now we're realizing that really for you, especially in today's competitive environment, for you to succeed in any organization, you need to focus on the employee, right? You need to make sure that you have the right people in the right seats to help you execute or whatever vision and purpose that you're trying to build. Without that, it's basically just an idea. How
Mm.
you get to that idea is really by keeping an eye on the big picture, right? But also understanding the nuances of how what drives people, what motivates them at the granular level, and how you can bring them along to execute on that vision. So it's if you're looking at it from an HR standpoint, it's really a mix of things. It's not one particular thing, right? There's a component of leading with empathy, but also holding people accountable to certain standards.
So can you emphasize on something? So you mentioned what makes employees or individuals, like what motivates them at a granular level. So from your research and your experience, can you share with us in the audience what are some things that do motivate a everyday employee?
So everybody's different, but in general, I want to say a mix of autonomy is really important for people, right? Having that ownership of what they're doing, helping them grow in whatever they're learning and growing, and then connecting that activity with a higher purpose. Like we all want to know we're making a difference in the world. So those are a combination of all these three. It can be different for anybody, but I think those three are really core to keeping people grounded and motivated in what they're doing.
And then on the other side, in terms of the employer, what are some things? How do you keep their interest in mind? Because as you mentioned, it's that balance. So how do you keep their interest in mind? And then what are some things the employer looks for when they're trying to bring someone from the outside and make them part of their family?
Wow. Okay. So there's two parts to that question. I'm going to tackle it in two ways. So the employer really could be anybody, right? Like as HR, you are the heart of the organization. So you're talking to different departments. You're talking to managers at, in sales. You're talking to managers in marketing. You're talking to the leadership team, and these are all different personalities. And so knowing where and how to talk to each person and
Mm.
each personality is going to be really integral to help drive that culture. So that's one piece of it, is really understanding people on a personal level. Looking at the numbers, like sometimes you have to look at those numbers and understand what the business is, what drives revenue for people. And on the flip side, you want to understand, like in the marketing, what is their vision for the brand. And it's really comes with experience, right? And this is why you see the traditional HR function moving from the traditional HR function. A lot of people now that are leading HR come from marketing and they come from sales, because you have to lead with influence. So that's the one part of it. And then the second part of that, which you were talking about, stakeholders, is again the employee. So looking at the employee from a customer lens, you want to look at the life cycle of the employee. At what stage in their life they are, and how are you going to align your um, experience with what their needs are. So we found that if you just give a cookie cutter employee experience, they're going to go to another organization. So in order to keep that connection, in order to keep that motivation going, it's a give and take between what the business needs now and what the employee needs at that life stage. Is it maybe they need a growth? Maybe they need some time off to recruit. So really looking at people from a humanistic lens, I think, is what's important here.
So I guess digging into that humanistic lens, a great segue into the next question, which is, so if you don't want that revolving door of employees coming in and leaving, what in like in today's age, how has HR changed in the way it's investing in the employees? Like, so what are some ways, like what are some of the benefits, the perks, and some of the leeway that are given to employees today that may have not been the case, say 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago?
Oh well, we saw like in the Googles and the Facebooks and all these like big companies trying to put all these bells and whistles, and those are nice perks. But I think for people to really want to connect, there has to be a purpose. There has to be a higher vision for the organization. We have to align on certain values, right? So that's the humanistic part of it, and then. Um, Thinking about that a little bit more, I want to say helping people again in their stage of growth. So, what do they want to be, right? Where are they going in their own personal journey, and how can you align that with the organizational needs? Helping them develop, even if that development is not going to come back directly to the organization, I think is a critical piece of investment for organizations. And that's a hard pill for most companies to bear. But I'm seeing a shift that way, where they are investing in their employees. They are providing lessons. They're providing resources for them to develop in skill sets that's outside the need of the organization, just to create that level of to breed that level of creativity. So to give you an example, when I was doing this earlier, we hit kind of a ceiling with our pipeline, and we couldn't compete in the Bay Area to hire. We kept, to keep with the hiring patterns, and so we decided that we were going to shift our focus to the potential, high potentials, and we created a training program for them, where they were paired with a mentor. They were given resources to learn, and then were given the certificate. It was really one of the core components of our employee experience, and we found that not only helped us get the talent we needed, but it also helped with retention. So creating that growth pattern for people is really, really essential, and you can see it return in spades, and it doesn't always. I want to say it doesn't always pay off, but in the long run, it's really where the experience should be going. Really helping people build that leadership potential.
It also seems like a great way to further the reputation of the organization, right? Because even if the employee winds up leaving, in terms of now, like obviously your reputation precedes you, right? So other individuals are possibly interested in joining that organization are going to hear that whether you leave or not, the organization is going to spend dollars, time on you, give you mentorship, give you all these opportunities. So it sounds like a very good tool also in terms of furthering the organization's value and its basically place on the map. Um,
Exactly. And that's exactly what it is. It becomes its own employer branding of its own, right? It becomes its own PR that people start referring their colleagues and friends to the organization. So it works both ways. And it becomes this give and take where people see that you're investing in them and they invest right back in you.
so now I'm gonna have you put on. So if you could go back in time and give yourself some advice when you first started HR, what advice would this Tanal we have in front of us today give to the Tanal that started off in HR?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. I want to say small talk. So
Hmm.
small talk, I think, is the biggest oxymoron in all of history, because what I found is small talk has, the effect of it has exponential results.
Hmm.
Like just that 5 minutes in the beginning of a meeting, getting to know what your colleague did over the weekend, or what their personal aspirations are, can really create that connection that you're looking for, and build that trust and engagement. So that is what I would go back. I would give that to any leader, not just HR. Like really get to know your people at the personal level. It doesn't have to be, family oriented, but knowing them at a more personal level goes a long way.
It makes sense, right? Because if you, I think it's all connecting in terms of what you've been saying. Like if you know more about your employee, and you know what makes them tick at a personal level and their interests, it furthers the relationship at work, but it also helps you understand what's motivating them in the first place, which can help you either like develop them or figure out maybe a more proper role for them. Um, so I guess now to transition, I want to talk about what are some of the most common challenges, not for you, but any HR leader has. What are some of the most common challenges that you face at a growing organization? Whether that be like people like pay discrepancies or job titles or benefits or workplace disputes. What are some of the most common pitfalls? And what, as an experienced leader, what are some advice that you have for other HR leaders?
Hmm. So traditionally, business has always been about metrics, right?
Hmm.
We're always looking at the numbers. And I think the most important part to all this is, if you do the hard work first and put the intentionality and create those set of values that are going to guide your decision, and that's really the hard work, right? It sounds fluffy, but I think that's the biggest component of it. And when you put that hard work in, the metrics will come. So that's the one advice that I would give, is really understanding that nuance, putting that intentionality, because when you're working with people, like I said earlier, everybody's different, everybody's motivated
Hmm.
differently. But if you understand like what's the reason, the why behind the action, it helps breed a little bit more understanding, and you get forgiven a little bit easier, so that things are not festering and you can scale the way you're meant to scale. And the core thing that I found, I've been part of almost 3, 4 organizations that have gone from, ground up. And that this inflection point where, people are coming in from different backgrounds, there's growth, and you see, where before you were all sitting around one table, now you have different units, you have different departments, and now you have to talk across different departments. That's where it gets complicated,
Hmm.
especially now with remote settings. Add another level of complexity there. So it's really important to have intentionality and have those guiding values that are going to help you make the right decisions.
It's every time you say something, it triggers another question or another thought. But I guess randomly, like what's your approach or what's your take on remote working? And also, obviously with LaunchGood, we have all of us are remote, but there's also a lot of international players. So I know that traditionally this is something that would have been a big no-no, right? People working in different time zones, not acceptable. People working remotely, not acceptable. So how is it that we and you have made this work?
Yeah, I've been working remotely for over 10 years.
Wow.
So it's something that I'm used to. It does come with the good and the bad. One, you have the flexibility. Two, there is that element of loneliness, and you need the human
Mm.
connection. And I think how we've made it work is really, again, creating those moments of connection. uh, you know, Slack goes a long way. You've seen how we use Slack intensively. It can get confusing. So really, again, putting the intentionality behind it and understanding, the purpose of it, helps. Creating those moments like having a chat, at the end of the day, a lot of the teams that we have actually have their own team culture where they have these get to know you meetings after work, right? So that, creating those moments, because you can't have those in person. Like before, you could have those incidental meetings, now you can't. So you really have to be thoughtful about it and plan them ahead. So that we use things like Donut to have random meetings. We want to create more, more work blocks where people are working separately but together, and yeah, and have game nights. I don't know if you've had a chance to join game nights, but if you hadn't, those are really super cool, very fun. That's where all our competitive nature comes in, and it's okay.
No, it also, like, from a very commonsensical standpoint, it seems very basic, right? If there's talented people that live in a different part of the country or a different part of the world, there's no reason to use that as a means to like eliminate them from an open position, right? Basically, find people where they are, wherever they are. So I think your leadership in HR and LaunchGood in general, that it's a very effective model of finding the right people, and there's nothing that should stop you from finding the right people. So that's something that's very commendable. Um, And then
Yeah.
any
To that, actually, I
go
think
ahead.
that is it's not just a reason not to hire. I think it's the reason to hire, right?
Mm.
Because we know that diversity breeds innovation. So by having all these people from different backgrounds is really the key to our success. Bringing all these different perspectives, whether it's personality or culture wise, it does add a little bit of challenge in terms of understanding and communication. But it's definitely worth the challenges. And once you find alignment, in terms of the values again, or you find a work dynamic that works, where for now we're doing overlapping hours. Yes, we work in different time zones, but we have an understanding that there are certain hours between all the different regions that overlap. So we have that point of contact.
No, I love it. I love it. I think the innovation key is something that is not paid enough attention to in terms of, and I think that's what a beautiful way to put it together, right? There's going to be some small hurdles in terms of bringing in people from different parts of the world, which are easily very easy to kind of adjust for because it's just usually language barriers and language or understanding of different idioms and whatnot. But in terms of the innovation that results from it because of people coming from such different backgrounds is it's worthwhile. So give us a little insight as we close now. Give us a little insight into some of your challenges. We want to bring some sympathy towards HR so people understand the role of HR and how difficult it is to manage different stakeholders and manage everybody's expectations. You mentioned something earlier which I wanted to touch upon in terms of data, right? So it's funny because as you were mentioning it, I'm just thinking about my lifelong experience where when you work with different teams, there are some teams that rely purely on numbers, and there are other teams that don't really look at numbers, but they think about ideas, and they maybe they're operating off of feelings and emotions, which is not wrong. And then
Yeah.
sometimes when we have these different teams that have to work together, there's so many challenges that could arise. But I think again, the potential synergy and the genesis of what you can create by these different teams working together, it could be amazing. But my question to you is, so for example, a job is opened and it's a particular job title, a particular job description, and maybe you get like 100 CVs and resumes on your desk or on your email. So how do you approach even these challenges of having a job opening, but now you have to siphon through all these resumes and you have people coming from such different backgrounds?
Yeah. Yeah, I think people see people on culture, they see the good parts of it. They
Mm,
see the engagement part and the game nights, but there's a lot of back end logistics to make that happen.
mm,
And those are the challenges, really. It could get really bureaucratic, but thanks to technology, a lot of that is being streamlined. So when I go into a role, that's my first, game plan is where do I look through the processes? What can be streamlined and automated so
mm.
that I can, focus more on the higher level items. So when I get 100, resumes, one is like looking for the keywords, like what are the keywords that we're looking for? What are the skill sets? Looking at LinkedIn to see like how that balances out in terms of their resume. And of course, relying a lot on references. Back end references go a long way because, everybody can write a resume, or most people can write a resume or have it done for them. So there's different components to hiring, and that's one of them. And of course, there's the long hours. But
Mm.
when you connect those long hours to the purpose, it makes it worthwhile.
It becomes much easier. So
Yeah.
I'm going to give you the final word. What's your final word? What advice do you have to potential individuals who are interested in joining or becoming HR professionals and leaders?
If you want to be an HR leader, you have to understand the business.
Mm.
You have to look at the trends. You have to be plugged into what the industry is, what are the challenges that your CEO and your teams are going to be facing, and work backwards from there. So it's not just about hiring and firing, right? It's really about what value can you bring to the organization to help drive their own set of goals.
So, ladies and gentlemen, today we had Tanal Basma on, the global head of people at LaunchGood. Tanal, thank you so much for your time and your insight, and please do join us again in the future.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun. Thanks, Imran.
The pleasure is ours. Thank you.